A short while back, I was thinking of the kind of conversations that we could have on this program, and I thought, why not talk about the possibility of becoming a crorepati in 10 years? And I asked a colleague of mine just this afternoon what they thought about the possibility of becoming a crorepati in 10 years. The answer kind of surprised me because she said, 10 years is too long. So I said, what is a good time frame? She said, I'd like to become a crorepati in 5 to 8 years. And when we looked at the numbers, it seemed like that was a bit of a stretch. But join me to tell me about the possibilities and hopefully give me a few tips and tricks is Feroze Azeez, the Deputy Chief Executive Officer of Anand Rathi Private Wealth Management. Thank you so much, Feroze, for taking the time, and hopefully you're going to be able to tell me something and give me good news so that I can tell my colleague that this is possible. But how important is it to have realistic goals? 10 years I thought was a reasonable time frame. What do you think?
Good evening. I think, of course, 10 years is a very reasonable time. Now, when you have a plan which is of 10 years, there are going to be goals which you will need to meet 10 years from now, 20 years from now, 30 years from now. Being realistic is very important. Okay, when it comes to money, the balance between risk and return is very critical. So if you stretch your goals too much, then you're skewing yourself to risk more than you should be. So point one. So having a very unreasonable goal actually reduces the chance of meeting the goal. If you're trying to aim to get there at 5, you may not even get there in 10 because you've taken undue risks. So that's one point. Second is, most people, the practical side is you have a corpus accumulated so far. Maybe your colleague already has 10, 20 lakhs accumulated. And then if you supplement it with consistent recurring investments, then getting to a crore could be possible in 5, 8 years as well. It depends on what's the start point of the accumulated amount and what's the stretched number in terms of per month savings you could add to. But having said which, it's important, very, very important, Alex, to have a very reasonable goal so that you're not going overboard on one of these variables, either risk or return.
Feroz, we often speak, and I think one point that is stressed very clearly is the need to set goals. But I wanted to have this conversation with you just to discuss the possibilities and to lay out a possible roadmap if somebody has an idea. A 1 crore, some people would say, wow, I would take my lifetime to accumulate this. But I also want to discuss, look, it is possible if you work hard to achieve, if not 10 years, 15 years. But let's discuss a baseline situation, right? Where you're talking about the possibility of starting right now, making SIP investments over the course of the next 10 years. Is it possible to earn 1 crore in 10 years?
Yes, of course, it's possible, but it will require some key attributes of the investor to answer your pointed question. But going back to the very important point which you made is having a goal. If you have a desire, then you will find ways and means to achieve the desire. Quite a few people live without a desire. So having a goal is very important, very underrated. Why? Because I've met several people, several thousands in the last couple of decades. I've been advising HNIs probably, where most people would ask you questions like, what market ka kya lagta hai, FD ka kya lagta hai, what do you think of real estate? They ask questions which are product related or asset related. They don't want to begin with a goal. So having a desire of getting to a crore itself increases the chance of getting to a crore. So it's brilliant. Second is it possible? The answer is possible. A marginal calibration with respect to your own personal finances. Like you said, it doesn't happen in 10. It can happen in 13. It can happen in 14. And if you're really, really rigorously aspiring for that goal and going after it, it could happen in 8 as well. Who's to say?
I sent a few, I asked for a few case studies where we would look at this, right? And you mentioned this as well, Feroze. And I'm going to read it out for the benefit of our viewers. You've sent back data to us. You've said that if you do an SIP of 43,000 rupees for a period of 10 years with a rate of 12.4% per annum, you can reach that 1 crore mark. Of course, if you start at a lower SIP, it would take you longer to do that. And of course, this is something that you do with a very aggressive allocation towards equity. But to your point, Feroze, where you were saying that it depends on your starting point, where you say that if you have 10 lakhs, if you have 20 lakhs that you've accumulated, that makes things easier, doesn't it?
Yes, it surely does. It surely does. If you have a start point of 10 lakhs, you'll just need 30,000 rupees per month at 12% to get to a crore. If you don't have that 10 lakhs, like you read out, 45,000 is needed. So that 10 lakhs gives you a kicker such that you can reduce your SIP amount by one third and still do 30,000 and still get to a crore. So that pedestal which you get or platform you get to build on really helps. If you already have accumulated 25 lakhs, you just need 10,000 rupees per month at the rate of 12% to get to a crore. So as you see, that if it's 10 lakhs, your SIP amount comes down from 45 to 30, which looks more practical. If you have 25 lakhs accumulated across different assets, different, maybe a EPF, a PPF, all of it put together, if you got your strategy right on the first 25, you just need 10,000 rupees a month to be able to get to a crore, even at a 12% return. I think that's what is important, but I can't emphasize enough. Quite a few people want to not have this goal. So sailing without a compass is what I would compare this with, not having that aspiration of a crore.
And I think this is such a powerful statement, don't you think, Feroze? Particularly the case which you just read out, where you say that even if you have 10 lakh that you've accumulated, suppose you've spent the first 5 years or 7 years of your career and you accumulated that 10 lakh rupees, you're putting it to work, and over the course of the next 10 years, you're doing 30,000 rupees, and it's possible that you're married, your partner is also earning. This is a reasonable expectation that you can possibly do, and you're creating a significant amount of wealth. But let's take it further, right? Let's stretch it even further, Feroze. Saying that in 10 years, assume that our individual, maybe me myself, I've managed to accumulate this 1 crore, and I don't pull out that 1 crore rupees. What are the possibilities that could occur in the following 10 years if I continue with my investments? How much wealth can I accumulate?
I think you can surely accumulate if you already have a crore, for example, and an SIP amount of 45,000 rupees, which I think if somebody has accumulated a crore, it tells you a sense of what kind of income brackets does he have and what kind of disposable incomes. So if I assume a 45,000 rupees, an SIP amount, then you get to a 4 crore, 10 lakh kind of an amount at the 12% rate. So I think 4 crores is a reasonable corpus, including an extra home or other assets which you might not have counted. You can be an HNI, which is $1 million plus. So I think, Alex, with the 1 crore kind of a start point, you can definitely get to 4 crores with a reasonable amount of 45,000 rupees systematically being invested. The more important part is how do you ensure that your crore earns 12% and does not just swing like a pendulum and come back to square one and earns you that 12, not the 8, not the 6. That's what managing the money is all about, and I'm sure you understand that. So 12% return is possible if you make simple, sensible portfolios with high degrees of possibilities and probabilities both.
But Feroze, let's talk about that just a tad bit more, okay? Because it's not just, like you said, it's not just deploying money, right? You need to have a sensible approach to it. How important is sticking to that plan, though? You make a plan at the start of the 10 years. You say that, okay, I'm going to have an asset allocation where consistently over a period of time, I'm going to have 80-20 deployment, 80% towards equity, 20% towards debt. This is assuming that you have a fair understanding of your risk profile, and even that equity portion, Feroze, is in products that fit your risk profile. How important is it to stick to that course, and how important is it to have that patience and consistency over the next 10 years?
I think it's very important. Sticking to the plan is the basic need of any management. So sticking to the plan is very important. What will happen is you will have several distractions, several temptations, because you're going to have innumerous conversations. Somebody will digress you with a cryptocurrency money he made last week. Somebody will come and tell you, why don't you buy this unlisted share? If you can keep a simple portfolio which marries your need, your risk profile, and you have to stay the course. Let me give you an example. Very lately, I was analyzing one person who actually exited equity in 2005 with a crore of rupees to buy an apartment, which was a second home, because his spouse said so. the value which he sold now, that apartment which he bought for a crore in 2005, sold at 4 crore 68 lakhs. He was very happy, and the spouse was happy as well. That 1 crore has transformed itself to 468. Somebody distracted him. He had a builder friend. He said, Ismail. Then I compared and told him if he didn't sell the equity and held on to the same funds, which were three funds, if he held on, he would have been at 16.58 crores. Right? So not sticking to the plan, getting digressed to buy a property in Gurgaon, landed him with 11 crore opportunity loss. Now that's massive. But so the point I'm trying to make is if you've decided a specific asset allocation, don't let your friends, your relatives, or anybody for that matter digress you from the plan. When a pilot takes off his aircraft, he has a clearly defined path till he lands. So if you could stick to the course, is when you will land safely. You can't just keep moving the goalpost as frequently as people do.
I think that's a very important statement that you've just made, Feroze, because if the individual who you're speaking about made that mistake, I'm sure that once our viewers reach that landmark, the more money you have, the tougher it gets to say no to those things. Would you say that that's true?
No, I think off late, everybody has this sentiment. Earlier, there were two sentiments or emotions when it was managing money, which was fear and greed. The third emotion, I think, has really, really played out as a large influencer in decision making, which is fear of missing out. People have this tendency of fear of missing out, and it's across strata, across age groups. People think that they're missing out something and they want to actually try their hand at stuff which looks more contemporary. But you're right. As the money becomes bigger, each decision could impact your life significantly more. So it gets tougher.
Let's talk about the benefits of having a step up SIP. Not everybody can put in 45,000 rupees per month at the start, and that's the most aggressive that we had talked about, right? Where you say it's going to be challenging, especially if you're talking about the average guy here in Mumbai. It's a costly city to live in, let's admit that. 45,000 rupees may be a stretch for everybody, but there is an advantage, Feroze, wouldn't you say, to step it up over the course of a person's career?
Yes, absolutely. Stepping it up is like hope of the future earnings, which in India, professionals have very, very good appraisal cycles. I was speaking to somebody who's based out of Switzerland. He says, my salary has not changed for the last 5 years, and he's happy about that. It was to my surprise. In India, we're used to a 5, 7, 8% increase in our salaries. Even with mediocre performance, average performances also get 4, 5%. Zero appraisal is a very rarity. So step up is a very practical thing for an Indian kind of a context. If you could actually, let's take an example. If you were going to be investing for 18 years, and if you actually stepped up by 10%, if you were investing 10,000 rupees in the first year, a 10% step up implies you increase it every year by 10%. So the subsequent year, you're investing 11,000 rupees. In the next year, after 11,000, you increase it to 12,100 rupees, which is 10% greater than the previous year. So that's called the step up SIP. And if people could do that, which I think people can afford to do, because salaries go up more consistently, like in the global environment, you can reduce the period. If it was going to take you 18 years, with a 10% step up, you can reduce the period to 15 and a half years. If you could do a 20% step up, you can reduce a 15-year period straight down to 11. So I personally think reducing the periods by almost 20-25% is possible just by stepping up your SIP. And don't get too very bogged down if you can't afford a 45,000 today. But who's to say you will be very easily and comfortably be able to afford the same amount 3 years, 5 years from now?
Okay. The other thing is what happens in situations where there are sharp drawdowns. We saw that in March 2020. I think because of advice that was dispensed on platforms like this one, people were able to take advantage of that. But the larger your corpus is, the more pain you feel at that moment, where you're seeing a huge dwindling of the capital that you worked so hard to amass. Feroze, how important is it to utilize situations like that. And on the flip side, where suppose you have an 80-20 allocation, and because of a bull run, you have a 90% allocation towards equity, how important is it to take some money off the table? Do you think that that is important to do?
Yes, so let me answer the first part of the question. There are two things. When you get into equity, it is to accept the nature of equity. My colleagues who are in the research always give us inputs which help us be more prudent and rather than emotional during bad times. We analyzed the last 22 years of equity, especially Nifty in India, which is a good representation of the largest index of the country. Every year has dropped peak to trough average 20%. Okay, if you leave the two important years of fall, which is the global financial crisis of 2008 and the pandemic of 2020, if you leave these exaggerated periods, the average fall equity has shown every year from peak to trough is close to 15%. So anybody who enters equity should know this data and should accept this attribute of equity. Equity behaves that way. So don't be surprised if you see a 10% fall. People start looking for answers. Why did the market fall? That's market's behavior. And 20 years, 22 years is good enough evidence to prove that behavior. That's point one. Point two, markets also have shown a very, very good attribute. Anytime there is a sharp fall, the rise is very, very sharp. Because everybody who have sold during that sharp fall is desperate to get back in, and they don't care about the price at which they come back. So sharp falls have always triggered bull runs, like the pandemic did. The 2009, if you remember, May 14th or something, where elections happened, and in a single day, market went up 20%, and the subsequent day, it went up 17%. That was because there was a steep fall, there's a steep rise. So don't see a fall as an adversity. See it as an opportunity, because time has proved those are opportunities. But when you're on the eye of the storm, will you be able to think that way? It's difficult unless you mentally prepare and design your mind to think that way. Then in the eye of the storm, you will be far more comfortable.
Feroze, I want to specifically ask you, would you say that it's important to also take money off the table?
Yes, sorry, I missed that question. So don't see it as a money off the table. See it as a rebalancing to your strategic asset allocation. If I've decided I'm going to be 60-40, if 60 becomes 70 by the virtue of the market movement, any 10% movement from the desired allocation requires a repeg to the earlier decision. So that implies that you would have removed money from equity and bought debt, or vice versa during corrections. Do that I would call it as rebalancing, which in effect makes you get some money off the table during bull runs.
Much, Feroze, for taking the time. Hopefully, I can follow some of the moves that you have suggested and become a crorepati in 10 years.
Sure. Thank you so much.
All right.